You ever look at an animal and notice the tiniest little details? Well, what if I told you that a small flap of skin inside a marsupial's ear, or, the lack of one, could tell us an incredible story about millions of years of evolution? Today, we're basically playing detective. We're following a clue that's been hiding in plain sight, and it reveals the huge difference between the hunter and the hunted in the world of Australian marsupials. All right, so take a look at this Tasmanian devil's ear. See that little flap right at the entrance to the ear canal? It seems so minor, right? But scientists started to suspect it might be a kind of secret weapon, a piece of biological tech giving some animals a serious advantage. The big question is, what exactly is it and what does it do? So that little flap is called a tragus. And hey, you have one too. It's that small bump of cartilage right here. For us, it doesn't really do all that much, but for Australian marsupials, well, the presence or absence of this tiny feature turned out to be the key to unlocking a major evolutionary puzzle. To get to the bottom of this, scientists looked at the ears of 23 different Australian marsupial species. We're talking everything from tiny insect eaters all the way up to large grazers. They carefully cataloged which species had a tragus and which didn't, and they were looking for a pattern. And you know what? A pattern jumped out almost immediately. It was like a clear line was drawn in the sand. On one side, you had the hunters, carnivores like the Tasmanian devil, and insect eaters like the fat-tailed dunnart. They all had a tragus. And on the other side, the grazers and foragers, animals like koalas and bilbies. They didn't have one. Okay, so things were getting interesting. And the numbers were really stark. Out of all 23 species they looked at, only 10 had a tragus. This wasn't some random 50-50 chance. This was a clear dividing line in evolution, and it pointed directly towards one thing. I mean, just look at this. The pattern is impossible to ignore. The hunters, like the carnivorous Tasmanian devil and the bug-eating dunnart, they both have a tragus. Yep. But the animals that eat plants and roots, the koala, the bilby, the possum, none of them have it. The connection between what an animal eats and this little piece of ear cartilage was becoming undeniable. So all the evidence was pointing in one very clear direction. It was time to finally connect the dots and reveal the big breakthrough of this whole investigation. And here it is. The tragus is a hunter's trait. The study found this incredibly powerful link between having this feature and hunting for your food. Every single carnivore had one. Almost every insectivore had one. And guess what? 0 herbivores or omnivores did. So, the tragus is a hunter's tool. But why? What does it actually do? Okay, this is where it gets really cool. Because, it's one thing to know that there's a connection, but we need to know how this small piece of cartilage helps an animal track down its dinner. The tragus isn't just some random evolutionary leftover, it's a sophisticated piece of acoustic hardware. Its whole job is to help an animal pinpoint the exact location of a sound, which, you can imagine, is an invaluable skill when your next meal is a tiny insect rustling around in the dark. So here's how it works. When a sound wave from, say, a scurrying beetle enters the ear, some of it goes straight in. But another part of that wave actually bounces off the tragus. This creates this tiny secondary echo that arrives a millisecond later from a slightly different angle. The brain brilliantly processes this delay to figure out not just left and right, but also up and down. It's basically nature's built-in 3D sound system. And hey, this isn't just a theory. We see the exact same technology in another group of expert hunters, bats. For bats, the tragus is absolutely essential for echolocation, helping them snag insects right out of the air. In fact, studies show that if you mess with a bat's tragus, its hunting ability just plummets. It seems like marsupial hunters evolved the exact same incredible tool for the same deadly purpose. Now, like any good mystery, this one has a few plot twists. There are a couple of animals that don't quite fit the pattern, and figuring out why they're different makes the story even more fascinating. So, let's meet the numbat. It eats insects, so it should have a tragus, right? But it doesn't. At first, this seems to break the entire theory. Why would an insect hunter be missing this crucial piece of gear? Well, it all comes down to specialization. See, the numbat almost exclusively eats termites, which it finds in these big mounds during the daytime. It doesn't need to track a scurrying cricket in the dark. Its food is just sitting there. For the numbat's lifestyle, that fancy 3D hearing just isn't necessary. Evolution is nothing if not efficient.
Okay, but here's the second twist. There are some animals, like the tiny honey possum, that live exclusively on nectar and pollen, yet they do have a tragus. They aren't hunting anything, so why would they have a hunter's tool?
Researchers suggest a really fascinating alternative: defense. For a tiny, vulnerable animal like a honey possum, that same 3D hearing could be the difference between detecting an approaching owl and, well, becoming dinner. So a tool for hunting can be repurposed to avoid being hunted.
So after digging through all the evidence and the exceptions, what's the big takeaway here? What can a simple ear really tell us about the world?
It all comes down to this really cool concept called the acoustic biotope. And the basic idea is that every animal's hearing is perfectly tuned to its own unique world of sound. A hunter needs to hear the high-frequency clicks of an insect. A social animal needs to hear the warning call of its group. A prey animal needs to hear the nearly silent approach of a predator. An animal's ears evolve to hear exactly what it needs to hear to survive. And that's the real bottom line. We started with this tiny, overlooked flap of skin. But just by following that one clue, we uncovered this grand story about millions of years of evolution, this life or death race between predator and prey, where every single feature is a finely tuned solution to the problem of survival.
It really makes you wonder, The next time you see a bird, or even a squirrel, look closer. What other incredible stories of survival are hiding right there in plain sight, just waiting to be told?